There will come a time when you believe everything is finished. That will be the beginning. Louis L'Amour. So here we are at the end of our 16 weeks, week 16, implementing an action plan, and we'll see what happens today. I'm really excited about this. So let's start out. We'll light our candle or turn on our candle and create a container for grief. Sometimes you got to get burned a little when you're creating a container for grief. Yeah, take a minute to just breathe that in. What does that mean to you? All right. So what we're going to do today is Richard's going to take us through a tuning in. We'll come back to our checkout, see how everybody's doing right now, since we met last week, and then go through today's material with a great deal of love for ourselves and each other. It's always a practice. It's not like we're always there. It's not like we say, I'm going to carry love through me this whole thing. It's like I'm going to try to remember that where things are real is in the depth of love, and I'm going to try to tune into that and keep tapping into that. So Richard, would you take us through a tuning in, please?
Certainly. Okay, folks, let's all settle in, settle on, and settle down. In our own spaces. Just noticing the support of whatever we're sat on and rested upon. Supporting our bones, supporting our muscles. That's it, just settling there. Just bringing ourselves back to our breath. That's it. Any thoughts, feelings, images, trying to shunt that focus aside onto the breath, onto that sense of being present. No need to grasp, no need to hold on to it, however compulsive or attractive that might feel like. Like an old story that we keep telling and we keep reading. Allow it to pass. Concentrate on now. As we're coming to the end of this course, perhaps with this clear space within that we are creating together now, call in that inner quiet. Invite it. That inner quiet that we have been creating and facilitating together for weeks is the container. That allows us to be present and not overwhelmed, but present with whatever we're experiencing. And with each breath in and with each breath out, allow that inner space to grow. Always with the breath, the inflow and outflow of air is like the rhythm of our lives. Just clearing that space for our coming together for this final session. And wherever this experience might lead us next. I'd like you to all just take note of our final 2 or 3 breaths, being aware of how your body breathes you, and when you have done so, come back into the room and be present with me.
Thank you so much, Richard. All right. Stop the share. Pause this to stand up. Stand up and breathe and stretch and move your physical body and, tap into where you're at right now. And during all the sharing, what came up for you and what you want to move out and move around and how you want to do that. Take care of yourself right now. Maybe you want a Qigong shake. While you're doing that, so I'm going to do a review of our course, and it was a 16-week course. We covered a lot of material, so you do not have to look at the screen. You do not have to sit down. You can move around, but just please do listen and let this kind of flow through you, because there was so much information. Maybe some of it got forgotten, or maybe this will kind of tap into some places that were really interesting to you that you forgot you might want to learn more about, because what we want to do is move into, what do we want to do next? Eventually, we want to get to what do we want to do next? What was so interesting that we want to pull it apart further? So we're going to do that. We're going to do that review and look at an action plan. And we're also going to take some time to do the survey, which shouldn't take too long, and then discuss what's next. So remember to take eye breaks, look away from the screen, close your eyes for 20 seconds every 20 minutes, or, as long as you want to, as long as you're able to listen, you don't have to look. So we'll start the review now. We started out by talking about stress and how cumulative stress can become trauma. That we know this when we feel like we've got kicked into survival mode and we are unable to have good reasoning, critical thinking, and awareness of choice. That to manage this stress, which is constantly filling us up, is to figure out how to pour some out every day. Empty the glass whenever we can and move towards systemic change so that it's not such a stressful culture and society. We talked about ways to do this by moving through the different body systems: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic, and or by looking at the 6 psychological functions and just asking ourselves, where am I at with this? And having that bring us deeper into where am I at, period. So the 6 psychological functions being feeling and emotion, sensation, need, impulse, and desire, imagination, intuition, and thought. We talked about maybe making a list, creating a list. And I had a list that I suggested, if these things work for you, maybe they'll be on your list too. Making a list of the ways that we can decrease stress, and looking at the list or remembering things from the list and doing it every day. And then we talked about extending our self-care tools. And one example was with aura clearing and strengthening, like doing that with the whole planet. Not just ourselves, but the whole planet. We talked about racialized trauma and how trauma is embedded in our body. And that concept came a lot into our course through Resmaa Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands. We talked about checking in with our body, checking in to say, where am I right now in my comfort zone? Have I been kicked into my constructive discomfort, learning edge, growth zone? And coming back to the breath, always coming back to the breath. We talked about privilege. We did a privilege walk to try and understand what is our privilege, because if we don't think about it, it's probably a privilege. We talked about oppression, and those of us who are more in our comfort zone might need to kick ourselves into our constructive discomfort zone to be able to see the people who are behind us or around us that we're not noticing, who are not in the center, to be able to work together toward pulling everybody toward the center, toward that comfort zone. And we talked about allyship, how people need to use common sense to figure out how to participate in social justice. We talked about how to become a strong social justice ally, and the triangle of social justice allyship, that all you need to do, all each of us needs to do at any given moment, is to do one of these sides of the triangle: oxygen, heat, fuel, and what that is. And Jonas helped us to understand the 5 I's: immerse, identify, imagine, involve, and invest. We talked about how psychological trauma is held inside of us, how it's held in the physical body. We talked about how psychological trauma can be ever present, or it can come and go, and usually is triggered by stress. How it can remain hidden for decades and then suddenly surface. How it usually occurs in groups. It becomes increasingly complex over time, and it becomes less and less connected with the original trauma experience. We talked about how psychological trauma is a wordless story our body tells itself about what is safe and what is a threat. And we talked a little bit about the vagus nerve and the lizard brain, and how what they do is they make us feel like either something is real or imagined. It doesn't matter. That we will respond to a threat, not only to our physical body, but a threat to what we do, say, think, care about, believe in, and yearn for. We talked about traumatic retention, and how in therapy, traumatic experience is sometimes described as an attempted action that got thwarted and became stuck in the body. How the reflexive trauma response can be stuck in the body and stay there until it's addressed. How it looks like extreme reactions, compulsions, etc. And it becomes strategies that our body holds on to and redoes over and over, so that it becomes standard ways of surviving and protecting itself. We talked about different symptoms that we can look at to see, is this traumatic retention, including anxiety, feeling spaced out, avoidant behaviors, attraction to danger, and addiction. We talked about how undetected trauma retention, that we're unaware. Most of the time we're unaware of these responses until we make ourselves want to become aware of it. How the body reacts to traumatic retention by protecting itself or trying to reenact the situation that caused the trauma or where the trauma happened. And that this reenactment happens happens in relationships, accidents, psychosomatic diseases, etc. We talked about how also psychological trauma is linked to dissociation. It could be part of the body that feels disconnected or numb or absent. It could be chronic pain. And we talked about things that help to get this going, get this out, get this released, move it, like Qigong shaking, which you can do right now. As you're listening, it might be bringing up things. So feel free to do what you need to do, including Qigong shake. We talked about how unattended trauma spreads from this body to another body in my family, through families, through generation to generation, and how unhealed trauma usually chooses dirty pain by using violence, rage, coercion, betrayal, or emotional abuse. And it just spreads. It spreads trauma. How trauma becomes culture because it keeps spreading, and then it becomes the way of life for everybody. We talked about how, using the egg diagram, we looked at the dark night of the soul and how the whole world right now is going through a dark night of the soul. How when we are moving our own healing process through myself and through us in a group, that we're creating this aura and energy field of healing, that we're doing this together, we're spreading it out. So systemic change includes personal growth and allyship. We talked about how personal care and caring for all helps to create this systemic change. And how using the will is so important, the strong will, the good will, skillful will, divine will. And within skillful will, we also talked about communication skills, clean pain versus dirty pain, calling out versus calling in. Within communication skills, we talked a little bit about nonviolent communication, guidelines to listening, active listening, communication enhancers versus blockers, and using I statements. We talked about clean pain and how it's when we do or say something that's really difficult that we know we have to do it. It's responding from the best parts of ourselves. And what it does in the end is mends trauma and builds capacity for growth. And how dirty pain is quite the opposite. It comes from a place of avoidance, blame, and denial. It's responding from our most wounded parts, and it reinforces traumatic retention and perpetuates historic trauma. We talked about calling out and calling in, and how first we have to look inside and interrupt our own bias by becoming curious. And next, we want to learn the skills to be able to know the difference between when we see bias in others, how to call out and how to call in. We talked about how stress, trauma, loss, and grief are more than personal, that this is collective, and it comes from the past and it moves into the future. We talked about how healing moves in different time directions. And we talked about when we do healing, we want to focus on our ability. We want to focus on strengthening our unifying center to be able to look at ourselves as a whole and look at the parts and learn how to heal them and grow them up. Jonas helped us to understand the growth mindset through this diagram of acceptance is in the middle and what's on either side of it, and how we might want to choose better, to reframe, to come back to resilience and strength. We talked about how building neural pathways toward new learning is doable through different things like focus on an energy intensive challenge and repeat that challenge like we've done for 16 weeks, and adopt a healthy living, low stress lifestyle, which we're hoping to continue our practices. We also talked about focusing on connection to the present moment, and we've practiced this in our tuning in to come back to the breath, come back to self, others, nature, and source through this present moment. And we talked about how we can understand the call, we can hear the call to heal when we pay attention to where there's constriction in our body, where there's discomfort, tightness, a feeling of being stuck, or heaviness, or fogginess, or emotional pain, that these aren't weaknesses. These are ways that we can tune in to know where our healing needs to happen. We talked about how this is a slow process, that we want to dip down and out and up into this egg, and we want to stay connected as a part of something larger than ourselves, that we want to do it in both directions. Both are important to have a larger sense of self. And we talked about how these parts of ourselves that need healing, that we want to learn how to accept them, that this is really an important part of healing. And these parts of ourselves we named, through psychosynthesis at least, as subpersonalities. They're also called other things. And how to identify and disidentify with subpersonalities. We talked about a lot of different tools to heal psychological trauma. Not every tool in the book, but a few tools in the toolbox we did talk about. One of them that we talked about, because it's so important to soothe ourselves while we're going through trauma, while we're doing our healing. One of them we came up with that we talked about and have been practicing is the butterfly hug with the alternate tapping. And you can do that now if you'd like. We also talked about when there's trauma that can be released, how to do that, using something called release and replace. Love this quote by Susan Raffo. We heal so that communities can take on healing as part of their everyday ways of being. That what we're moving toward is understanding that there's settling energy and protective energy. And the more we practice, the more we can settle and understand the protective energy doesn't always have to be there, even though we get kicked into that feeling. We talked about this through the vagus nerve, that the vagus nerve communicates through vibes and sensations, not only between our different body parts, but between people. And that when we settle ourselves and we settle ourselves with each other, we can harmonize together and start to create a culture of resilience and flow. We talked about how there are many, many, many losses, many kinds of losses, and that each one of them wants to be acknowledged and to be grieved. And that sometimes pain and illness are not meant to be removed. Sometimes they're meant to just be learned from as much as we can get from it. We talked about building tolerance. And we talked about, holy shit, that sometimes just reframing and looking at something that's happened helps us to understand that there is ruin in a treasure. Sometimes we can find that. We talked about how it's natural to experience an array of emotions in response to stress, trauma, and loss. That this array of emotions is called grief. And that as we experience this array of emotions, we say we are grieving. That grief can move us to action. It's an authentic reaction to life. It helps dissipate stress, trauma, and loss held in the body. And it's a means to open our heart to compassion. If we keep our heart open through everything, says Rumi, our pain can become our greatest ally in our life's search for love and wisdom. Spiritual allyship for ourselves and for each other comes through the form of compassion, allowing grief. Brian Stevenson said, there is a strength, a power even in understanding brokenness, because it creates a need and desire for mercy. And when we experience mercy, we begin to recognize the humanity that resides in each of us. We talked about how this grief is normal, and yet we often ignore it because our culture suppresses emotions and ignores pain. And the only way to do a paradigm shift toward authenticity and being whole is to create a new norm. And that's hopefully what we're doing individually and as our group. We talked about one way to help with this is maybe to have a grief mantra that we come back to sometimes, or we write about, where we say, I am grieving, and just keep doing that and see what comes out. That we can synthesize grief and life so that we don't feel like we're compartmentalizing. That we can do all sorts of things to help us to tune into grief, including the 4 questions. Where am I now? regarding grief? What is my potential regarding grief? What holds me back from my potential? And what do I need most in order to reach my potential regarding grief? We talked about when do we grieve? And maybe it's all of the above, daily, anytime a grief wave takes me, and at designated times and places. And we talked about creating space for this grief and for wisdom and our ancestors to enter. Maybe through reframing how we look at mistakes, holes, spaces, maybe using things like listening or trying polyrhythms. Elizabeth Gilbert said, "We do spiritual ceremonies as human beings in order to create a safe resting place for our most complicated feelings of joy or trauma. And that if our culture or tradition doesn't have the specific ritual we're craving, that we can absolutely make up a ceremony of our own devising." We talked about finding the meaning in the ritual and asking the question, what will support us to grieve regularly? Because this is not part of our culture, we're creating something new. We talked about how grieving is a complex process involving components to adapt to a changed reality. Because losses affect us forever, and it changes our view. That the task of discovering who am I now and finding a path to healing represents relearning the world. We talked about how to do this relearning, this self-discovery, opening to grief through deep journaling, that you can use writing prompts, and we came up with some writing prompts. We were given some writing prompts that might be helpful to come back to these over and over. We talked about touching in with the body always while we're doing this work, asking, what am I feeling in my body, and noticing. We talked about how important this is because often grief that's held in the body, it's been thwarted, and we want to complete the action. We want to first notice it and then be able to move through whatever was thwarted and get rid of that trauma, move through it with clean pain, using the 5 anchors, writing letters to ancestors, listening to ancestors, paying attention to our body's reaction to them. The 5 anchors being soothing ourselves, simply noticing the sensations, accepting this discomfort, staying present in mind, body, and heart, and safely discharging any energy that remains. We talked about how with practice we can consciously and deliberately relax our muscles, settle our bodies, and soothe ourselves during difficult or high stressful situations. And we talked about looking forward to an ideal, realistic situation that we don't know what it is yet by tuning into some future compassionate counsel and asking them to help guide us. How do we get from here to there? What is the next first step? And sharing and finding a team and collaborating with this, because there's more power together than there is individually. We talked about culture, how to change a culture, how do things become a culture, moving towards systemic change through cultural change, and essential aspects of creating a changed culture. So now that we've reviewed all of that, I'd like you to take a moment to maybe close your eyes and invite in this question. How will we move toward a culture of compassion and equity? How will we move toward a normal daily life that includes releasing stress, healing trauma, accepting loss, and allowing grief? I invite you to let that question settle in and move around your mind and your heart and your soul. I invite you to let it come to some kind of a wanting to move out into your hand and onto paper if you want to write about what comes up for you. So if you want to put that on hold for a sec, I'm going to ask everybody to fill out the survey now. And I am going to, just in case you don't have it, I'm going to copy and paste into the chat. Here's the chat. The link to get to the survey. That is not what I meant to do. Let's try that again. There. Okay, did everybody get that? Okay. So take some time with the survey. It's talking about highlights, application of material, any changes you've gone through, anything else, testimonial if you could, and then we'll move into what's next. That'll be a little bit into the survey too. So what I'd love for you to do is to keep that tab, your survey tab, and maybe, minimize it so that you can continue to do that a little later. But I wanted to make sure I wanted to help you get started, because I know sometimes for me, if I get a survey that after something and I don't always get to it, so I wanted to at least get started with it. But even if you're not done, you can just minimize it for now and finish it after, if that's okay. Is that okay with everybody to kind of finish up your sentence and come back to it? All right. Everybody ready? Tell me when you thumbs up when you're ready. Okay, awesome. All right, so thank you, Allie. Allie wrote, unfortunately, it goes to everybody. It goes to just me, but I'll write it to everybody. It's called Ikigai, and it's Japanese for finding your true purpose. So I'm just going to rewrite it and send that off to everybody. Allie just sent that in the chat. Okay. So come on back to the slide share. Get your screen so you can see the slide share. Yeah. And because Jonas is not here, I have Jonas on tape talking to us, because we wanted to offer you what's next. We wanted to offer this idea that Jonas's material is so rich, and he has set it up so that we can take pretty much any topic and move it through his material. But I just wanted to introduce you to Jonas's work, and I'm going to play this right now. I hope, there we go.
Imagine this. We're at a party together. You're enjoying a refreshing bottle of black cherry soda when all of a sudden I bump into you. The bottle falls, spilling black cherry soda all over the floor. We look at each other tensely. What happened? You might blame me for bumping into you, but I might blame you for not being more careful. Yet this blame game does nothing to solve anything, but it also ignores a deeper, more constructive truth. Because what did happen? Black cherry soda spilled onto the floor. That's it. because that's what was inside. If water was inside, water would spill out. If orange juice was inside, orange juice would spill out. And the same is true for me and you. Whatever is inside will spill out when life takes us by surprise and turns our world upside down. When we're not mindful of what we fill ourselves with, then our happiness, our peace, and joy become tied to our circumstances. When the world turns upside down, well, we have no choice. Our happiness spills out. And yet, when we are mindful of what we fill ourselves with happiness and peace and joy, then even when the world does turn upside down, we can still land on our feet. The choice is ours. Do we want to stand tall when the world is turned around? Or do we want to spill all over the floor when the world is turned upside down? The choice truly is ours. Now, as for me, I know what I'm trying to choose. Won't you join me?
Awesome.
Jonas. So, Jonas has so much material. I don't know if anyone had a chance to go onto Jonas's website. He has so many courses and so much material to offer. And we were thinking that maybe course 2, Jonas could take this one. I took course 1. That was kind of my baby. We were thinking Jonas could take course 2 and take any topic and move it through his material. So that's one option that we have. There are many, many options of where we might want to go next. And I wanted to do our annotation. There we go. And write down ideas that you have and just put them kind of on the table and see what we've got to work with. See what topics come to your mind. Maybe something that we've done that you want to open up, or something that we didn't even cover.
Excuse me, I'm thinking like relationships and like communication. I don't know if those would be together or separate. They kind of interplay. Especially like applying this material in that way more expansively.
That kind of goes with what I was thinking, which was how to be there for other people, which is basically relationships and communication. We kind of focused on ourselves. Now, how do we?
Allie, do you want to call that spiritual allyship, or do you want to call that relationships and communication?
Well, it's I like the spiritual allyships, and I would be in favor of adding that. But I think it goes more with the relationships and communication, because it's not so much the spiritual connection, but the actual doing of being a compassionate listener and responder. How do you respond?
Together.
Yeah, they kind of all fit together, and it's a big one for me. I had to learn that you don't have to fix people when they're not looking to be fixed. They're looking for a listener. They want someone to listen. And I just think, and the other one I was thinking was, oh, it slipped my mind. I'll come back.
So I was thinking of, again, along the lines of practicing what we have learned, how to how to express your needs. Compassionately. I guess, and I'm not going to give you some words right now that you can write. I have an issue with balancing other people's needs with my needs and have a tendency to just suppress mine, which doesn't help. So I guess it would be how to express my needs with compassion.
Which actually goes along with what I was thinking, which is living authentically. And I think expressing your needs compassionately definitely is a huge part of living authentically. So I think that all goes together.
I think
I support that too.
It's just adding to that, folks. Living authentically means also saying no.
Yeah. How to say
Knowing your
no.
boundaries.
Just saying, know your own, how far you want to push yourself. Because other people will know how to.
Right.
Yeah, know when to say no.
And that goes along with clean pain, because by saying no, you're being authentic and honest, but you're probably creating some bad feelings.
Yeah, a lot of clean pain, dirty pain stuff. Yeah.
You know,
So I think the key on the how to say no is not just saying no, but how to say it. I mean, I know you wrote how, but the how is
Right.
very important to me, because you can say no and just be angry that you have to.
Right.
So that's not too great.
So different ways of saying no.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also worth adding to that. There will be instances where there's no getting out of conflict.
Right.
That's just my, I mean, please call me out, but there may be instances where there's no matter what way saying no, it will be taken as rejection.
Right.
I would also like to see something about fear in interpersonal relationships.
Fear? You said?
There's a book, Fear, F-E-A-R. There's a book, I can't remember who wrote it. Love is Letting Go of Fear.
I've heard an acronym for fear. It's false. I think it's false experiences appearing real. Or
that's really good.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Or experiences might be the wrong word for E, but it's along that line.
I think there's some instance. I think there's
evidence. Sorry, false evidence.
False evidence appearing. Yes.
I apologize. Sorry, what were you saying, Richard?
I think fear is useful. Yeah, some fear is useful.
Yes.
We need to be able to discern whether it's clean fear or dirty fear.
Yeah.
Ooh, clean fear versus dirty fear. I like that.
So as in clean fear is a clear and present danger. Yeah.
Right.
Whether it be physically, personal, etc. Yeah. So dirty fear might be construed as a. I'm just riffing here, by the way. It's a pattern, an imprint.
Right. Like having fear about, because like fear gives us feedback that something is off, right?
Yes.
And being able to move through it. Because like having fear that like you all hate me is not that's not an accurate thing.
It doesn't stand to evidence, does it?
Right. But that imprint, right? Like, it really goes back to that imprint of a pattern of previous experiences. Yeah.
Like in bringing it back to what we've already talked about, fear that if you say no, you will not be liked,
Mhm.
Rejection.
or you will not be loved.
I'm hearing this, even though I didn't hear these words, but uncovering patterns.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And giving them space to kind of giving them space to work through. It kind of reminds me of parts work, right? Like you noticing this pattern or what part has this pattern and giving it the space to be able to work through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just something that you just said there about parts work, and this is just my own, I guess, observation of psychosynthesis, where there is an overemphasis on the personal components of our subpersonalities, and there's little to no, at least in my observations of the literature within psychosynthesis and just general speaking to practitioners, there's a general lack of connection with the transpersonal archetypal elements within us that hint at those, those instances in our lives where we might almost feel compelled or almost taken over by something else.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so almost the transpersonal elements within subpersonalities that are compelling to the point of compulsion and beyond. And I'm sure that we've all had that experience.
Mhm.
And this is where, just for my own learnings and application in my work with clients, is I apply astrology. And that was my introduction as a
archetypes.
Well, yes, it was through
Yeah.
Jung. It was through Jung and Jung's correspondences with Roberto Saggioli, who founded a psychosynthesis. And as it turns out, they were both, steeped in Hermetic law, and they were practicing astrologers themselves. In fact, apparently Jung wouldn't take on new patients or clients unless he had a birth chart. So it's just an understanding of the way that the 12 archetypes manifest in the world.
Mhm.
And that is part of what that's a framework, an approach where you can come to uncover patterns.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, that leads me to think about Qigong, because Qigong is totally keying into the archetypes, and it's showing you the cycle, and that you're always somewhere in the cycle, but through the archetypes.
I didn't know
So
that
it's
about Qigong. That's cool.
yeah, and I highly recommend it because it's been transformative for me.
So, if we were to maybe see where the overlap is, see what we want to do next, it looks like it starts with relationships and communication and moves through these different ways of dealing with what comes up as blocks. How to decipher the difference between real danger and imagined danger and fear. Connecting to the transpersonal, moving away from compulsions and reactions. Am I kind of putting it together correctly here?
Yeah, it kind of branches out from the relationships and communication into different experiences or ways to sort through it. I noticed that too.
Anyone
It
else
kind
see
of
a pattern
it
here?
kind of something along the lines of sharing what we learned in the first course, bringing it to our significant others, to our friends, to our business partners, and moving it forward, talking about what we did, talking about what why it was important, and sharing this to, like you said, you want to bring it to colleges or high schools or whatever. Well, what about our families, our friends?
Mm.
I mean, I haven't talked about this a lot. People know I'm in a grief group, but they have their own feelings
too.
about what that means.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
true, it has been a grief group. We've been able to express what I've been going through. I've been able to use it as a sounding board and getting feedback and having support. And it's all those things, but it's so much more. And
Mm.
that's part of the relationships and the communication.
Mm.
What did we do? What are we doing next? A lot of what the survey is asking us. What did you learn? What did you take with you? What we need to be able to verbalize that. So the survey is actually the perfect place to start. But I saw there was a box you could check. Send me my answers. I just kind of browsed through to the end. That's the material right there. I learned this, but I didn't learn this, or I learned this and this changed my life. And those are the kernels of the truths that we each took that should be built upon to go forward, to share it.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're bringing that out, Allie, because that was my thought too, and that's what Jonas and I especially were discussing, where we want to go next and how we want to move this forward. And one of the ways was to start to think about, like, we had charged everybody our beginner rate, right? Our beginner fee, the cost of joining. And we were like, well, what if we invite everybody to the next course to invite somebody else? And then it could be like almost a 2-for-1, because if we take the original cost, which was like $4.95, and then split that between two people, then it's the same cost as what you just did. And then it's a way of coming back and also sharing and also growing this, which is really what we want to do. So we were trying to think of ways to entice people to join. And sometimes, that's helpful to give big tuition breaks on classes and courses.
I actually have somebody that I have talked to about joining this group the next time.
I have somebody who might also be interested, and I like the idea of splitting the tuition too. I think that makes it more affordable for people who as well. So I think that's a really great idea. I'm already like turning of like who.
Yeah. And the more people, originally we were hoping to have, I don't think that it's good to have such a large group that we're not able to really share and be intimate.
Right.
On Zoom, I think it works to have maybe up to 6 people per leader or facilitator or co-facilitator. And that's why we have 3 facilitators, so that if we had 18 people, we could break into 3 breakout groups when we do sharing. Even though, you don't get to hear everybody sharing, by the end of however many weeks, everybody gets to know each other. And so I think that spreading this in small groups, like 18 per course, and having 3 leaders, or if we had more, then we could spread it out even more and have more people join. But I don't think more than 6 people per facilitator. I think that's sort of the limit. For me, that feels like the limit.
I think one thing to think about is, will course 2, can it be designed in a way so that it will be really good for people that did not take course 1? Because I think, frankly, it would be moving on to do what we've talked about for us seems like a good next step with the background and the experiences that we've had. But I'm I don't think that people, I don't know how it would be designed without doing a lot of repetition
Mhm.
for people that did not do course one. And if you did a lot of repetition, then that might be less helpful for people that have already done course one. I think that's a dilemma.
Yeah.
I
What
mean,
Jonas and I were thinking about is that anyone who wants to become a co-facilitator, anyone who wants to step up into that level, that they have to go through course one, that's the minimum requirement. And that hopefully all of the courses beyond course one, including course one, will be designed so that they're open to everybody, so that you don't have to have one before the other. They're a standalone unto themselves. But that course one is the basic foundation for anyone who wants to take this deeper.
yeah, and I mean, I think about how you set up the first course before we really got to the meat. We did a lot of like the basic stuff, and I feel like that would happen in course two anyway, which would be, and which, you know, I see where you're coming from too, Nancy, and I do think it's also a good reminder for us to kind of go through some of that same stuff to really, so then we can go even deeper because we've had course one, but for other folks who don't, it's a good introduction. So I think it can kind of be, I think it could work. I do see where you're coming from, Nancy, though. If like, I think if it goes on for too long, like there is a sweet spot, I think, of it, of the repetition going on too long or too short, or right, for everybody's needs to be met, for sure.
I think there's actually a lot of good work that we could do in if we used Remy's idea of it not being a complete repetition, but parts of it would be reviewed. And I mean, there was a lot at the beginning where there were links, and I didn't really establish practices. Like I haven't established Gabriel Roth warm up as a practice. We did it, I liked it, but I haven't gone back and written it into my normal workouts. There's a lot of reading that I might have either not done or done quickly. You know, there's so much there that if everybody else is just doing what we just did, I think we could go deeper in a lot of ways. And if it's truly something that's boring you because you did it before, we've got all these slideshows. You could go back and do something different, you know, because you're your own, you've done it before, you know, you can navigate the offerings with you know, with knowledge of what you've done and what you still want to do and what interests you, and looking at Jonas's work for a couple of weeks while everybody else catches up on my grandmother's hands, or finish my grandmother's hands, which I still haven't. You know, there's just so much. And then, hey, what was that book you were talking about? You know, catching up on all the things that people have recommended. There's so much there. It just seems that, you know, we could be real facilitators for the new people.
Yeah.
You know, oh, that book, that was what helped me when this happened. And we're a testimonial for that.
Right.
And then the new person gets a more, you know, specific recommendation rather than so much. There's so much there.
We're kind of like a liaison. We're, you know, between the material, some of the material, and the new people coming in and doing
Human
it.
links.
Yeah, yeah.
We're human links. Click on Remy. He'll tell you that. I like that.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that I thought it couldn't be done, but I do think, you know, a lot of thought needs to be put into how to make it valuable for
Everyone.
And it sounds like you guys have already started doing that. So
Yeah.
Like I was saying, like that sweet spot of, yeah.
that, I mean, later on, if things turn out the way you want them to, and there are lots of courses, and people can go in and take any course, not necessarily in the same order. In any given course, you're going to have people who you're going to have brand new people. You're going to have people who may have had course 1 and course 2, or may have had just course 3, and now this is course 5, and so forth and so on. So it's an interesting challenge, and that can also add richness to, I think, the experience of everyone, to have people coming from different places, which we do anyway, since we all have led different lives prior to taking the course.
Yeah, I do have this idea of, feeling like, doing course 1 and kind of going in the order is the best way. But obviously, right, like people are going to be coming in at different times. So like balancing even between the courses, what's different about each course, right? And what's the same, so that you can kind of pop in, pop out, and where, no matter where you end up starting, and whether that's course 2, 3, or 4, or whatever, you can still go back and go to the first one, but it's not like required. You know what I mean? Like it's able to, you're able to move through it.
I think it'll be a challenge, though. One aspect is that the best thing about the course was the friendships we made, and the trust, and the safe space, and the ability to share on a really deep personal level. And that would be hard if people were coming and going, and I think you might sacrifice some of that closeness. And it's so critical to have that. I think it's way different than just opening up a slideshow and clicking on links and learning things and reading books. Is having you to talk to. So
I agree.
Lots of questions, lots of aspects. Beautiful. So I like the idea of, eventually we're going to be offering many courses. And course 1 is an initial course that we want people to take, but we also want to build this ability for people to be able to tap into what courses touch them at the moment. And I think that the building friendship and building trust, quite frankly, building trust, I think that's going to be built into every single course. Keeping the courses small enough that the sharing is significant, and keeping the facilitation clean enough that it's helping people to feel like it's a safer space to be brave and to say things that, we might not ordinarily say, but that are needed. They're necessary. That clean pain, it's necessary to move us into our growth, and to feel supported while doing that. I think that's just necessary facilitation, becoming good facilitators. Just take a moment to stand up and breathe. So congratulations, everyone is going to receive a certificate of completion. It is being delivered to you at 11:30 or whatever time it is for you, Richard. We're all going to get one, a certificate of completion, and you can do that with that what you want, but we all deserve it. This was, it's a testament to you individually, to us individually, that we went through this 16-week course, that we moved ourselves from where we were to where we are. It's difficult to go through change and transition, and we did it. So I want you to take that electronic paper and really take the meaning that it's meant to give to you, which is, this is really important. This feels really significant. And thank you. So much love to everybody. We can all have a little love fest. Say every loving thing you want. Mwah.
Thank you.
Love you all
Thank
so
you.
much.
This was such a
Thank
Thank
great
you
course
for
today,
everything.
Thank you,
especially
Phyllis.
in
I
connecting
look
with
forward to
higher,
seeing
and
you
touch.
thanks
a lot.
everybody for sharing so honestly and openly.
You're all
I
again
look
soon.
forward to
This
the
is not goodbye.
Remy.
next course as well, and I know
Love
I'll
you,
see you on
Remy. Love you,
Monday.
Nancy. Thank
Love
you,
you.
Richard.
Love
I
you
am the
Oh,
butterfly.
thank you.
Ami, thank you. Love you.
Love
You
you
folks.
all so much.
Bye, everybody. Have a good rest of
Bye.
your
Bye-bye.
day.